Hola a todos! Welcome! This time this video is gonna be in English because I have a very special guest with us. It's Obi from Fedimint and Fedi. How are you, Obi?
I'm fine. How are you, Juan?
I'm very fine. So we met last year in El Salvador.
Yep.
We were talking about your plans to bring Bitcoin to billions.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us about that? And before that, why don't you tell us about how you started in Bitcoin and how this is not your first rodeo with...
Well, so I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011. So it's quite a long time ago now.
Very early.
And I was interested in it. I bought a little. I read the white paper because I was a geek. I was a CTO of a number of big European technology companies. And then I was running my own tech company. So it was immediately interesting to me. And also because my background's from Nigeria, I was aware of the unfairness around money, especially in the global South, Latin America, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So when I saw Bitcoin, it immediately spoke to me. 2 years later, in 2013, I set up an exchange in the UK called CoinFloor, and it went on to become the UK's longest running Bitcoin exchange. I ended up selling at the end of last year, just
great timing.
Probably a month after I met you, or 1 or 2 months after I met you in El Salvador. And the reason why was because I was already feeling that exchanges around the world were getting too much power. Too many people were not comfortable with self-custody, and so they were keeping their Bitcoin on exchanges, including my own. And I wanted to find ways of getting people off exchanges. And even more, all the new people in the world who haven't yet got into Bitcoin, my view was, and if nothing was changed, that the majority of them would also go to exchanges. So we had to give them a better alternative. So I started looking around, and in the middle of last year, around this time last year, I went to an event in Prague called Hackers Congress. And it was there that I met who became my business partner, a guy called Eric Syrian. That's actually not his real name, because Hackers Congress, people are very much into privacy. And he told me about this product that he had been working on called Fedimint. Now, in his mind, it was this incredible privacy technology, which it is. It's a really powerful form of privacy. But what I realized with my search for this way to get people off exchanges was that Fedimint had the potential to be decentralized custody. So you have Bitcoin, which is decentralized money, store of value. You have Lightning, which is decentralized payments. So you can send payments from one person to another very quickly and very cheaply. But what you didn't have was decentralized custody, i.e. holding the Bitcoin, a way of holding it in a wallet that wasn't an exchange or wasn't doing it all by yourself. And Fedimint was that. I then went to El Salvador because I was because I was looking around the world for other examples before committing myself 100% to Fedimint. And I saw Bitcoin Beach there. And I compared the two. And Bitcoin Beach is an amazing product, very successful. But I realized that Fedimint had the potential to scale to the world.
Okay. So you first saw Bitcoin as an opportunity for billions, for the people in the South, not as a speculative investment or like an asset class that could make you money, but a tool that could be used for people, for actual people who can benefit from this technology. Then you realize, okay, I'm gonna offer a solution for people to get into Bitcoin.
Yes.
But that solution was not perfect because it goes somehow against the ethos of decentralization and having your own keys, having your own asset, owning it, having sovereignty. And you said, okay, I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna create something new, which is Fedimint, which allows people to have their assets, not in a completely self-custodial way, but in a federated way, right? Like Fedimint, tell us more about Fedimint. How does it work? Why does it solve this problem of custody, of centralized custody?
Yeah. And that was a very good summary of the flow. It's like, here's a system which can free people from the existing financial system. And I decided to set up an exchange because I wanted to be the jailbreaker, taking them out of the prison of the fiat money system to this new sort of decentralized world. But over 8 years, I realized because of increasing regulation, I went from being the jailbreaker to being the jail keeper.
Yeah,
and effectively protecting people, the existing system, from this new system.
Because eventually exchanges are turning into banks. Regulation.
You could see we were slowly turning into a bank. And if that's what people want, that's up to them. But many people have come into Bitcoin because of the potential for owning their own money, being free. And many people, especially with the people I work with and try to support now, have no choice. They live under the yoke of authoritarian regimes or dictatorships, and they cannot trust their financial system or their banking system. It's controlled by people who do not have their best interests in hand. And so there is no viable choice, but they want a choice which is freedom giving for them. And so an exchange is not that. But Fedimint, I believe, is that balance. It has the simplicity of use, or even simpler when done correctly, of using an exchange. It's a simpler experience. It has a level of security, which obviously the best is to be self-custodial, but it's approaching that of self-custodial. And it has a level of privacy, which is better than both. It's like incredible privacy. And again, when you want to talk about getting billions of people into Bitcoin, you have to have privacy at that point. You cannot have one or two companies that can view billions of people's transactions where they're spending their money. That's worse than having a government with that level of view. And, it's that you're effectively turning into a CBDC type organization if you have that visibility. So that cannot happen, and we need a solution that works. So this is where Fedimint comes in. So the idea is, if you have your money on exchange, that's third-party custody, stranger custody. If you do it all yourself with a wallet, that's great, but that's do-it-yourself custody. It's a bit like fixing your own car yourself. What we have in Fedimint is community custody, where the most reliable, trustworthy members of the community custody the Bitcoin of the community on behalf of the community. So the community comes together, let's say it's a village, or a family. It could be as small as a family or a group of friends, or it could be a company or a village, or it could be a city, for example. It can range. But they come together and they decide to elect some people to be their guardians. They will effectively guardian the Bitcoin of that community on behalf of the community, or the family on behalf of the family. They will be the most highest integrity, most reliable people, and you use the wisdom of the community to determine who that is. So those people will then run one piece of software, the Fedimint software each. You just download the software and run it, a bit like running a Bitcoin node. Once it's run, you never need to touch it again, or maybe not for years until you run out of hard drive space on your computer. Okay. So each person downloads this Fedimint software. They enter the details of all the other Fedimint members and click run. And Fedimint takes care of the rest. It will form a federation of these users, and that federation effectively is like the community's own mini exchange.
Okay. So this software, when you install it, basically you're running like a Fedimint node.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just like a Bitcoin node or a Lightning node. It's a Fedimint node. It's designed to be unattended operation in the main. So once you set it up, just like once you set up a Bitcoin node and you click run, all the operations of handling money coming in, deposits coming in, payments by the Lightning Network or on-chain, payments outwards, or payments internally, or maintaining the privacy, they all happen automatically. And it also handles the situation where one or more of the Federation guardians, we call them guardians, these people have been chosen by the community, maybe their machine's gone offline. If your machine went offline, for example, you had your Bitcoin node and it went offline, you could have your own wallet connect to your own node, for example, and you can use your wallet to go around. But if your machine at home, where your node is running is off, you can't use your node anymore. With the federated model, as long as a majority of these guardians' machines are on, even if one or two turns off, you'll continue to operate. You won't even notice that. So it gives you much more reliability. But also, if one or more of the guardians becomes a bad actor, starts behaving in a way that's not in the interests of the group, again, the federation will keep going. So much like other consensus models like proof of work, as long as the majority are honest, you will be able to continue to process. And if someone is not acting in the interests of the group, all users will be immediately able to be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
So they can then transfer their money away if they were uncomfortable to another federation, because we expect people to
or
be
on-chain.
Or on-chain,
Yeah.
or so they can transfer it to Lightning, to another Lightning wallet, which we expect most users to do. Because at scale, with billions of users, our expectation is that the people who do on-chain transactions at that stage will be Lightning gateways who will be settling on-chain, and most users their default experience will be to use the Lightning network.
Perfect.
It's like if I'm making payments, most people make payments electronically, but if I had my life savings somewhere, it'd be very infrequent that I would take all of my life savings out in cash to transfer it in cash to somewhere else. The vast majority of the time, if not entire time, I would be doing it electronically, and it would be the same.
Okay, so let's go a step backwards, because we're talking about the federation, the guardians, but we haven't explained how do these guardians have custody. Why cannot they behave in a bad way? Like what are the incentives? And technically, like explain us a little bit about how this multi-sig works. Like you let's say you decide, okay, we are gonna pick these 5 guardians. These are the people on this community that we trust, that they have the technical abilities to handle this node. And then what? How does it work?
So we trust they have the technical abilities, but the technical abilities we've aimed to be very low.
Okay.
I mean, if they're able to run a Bitcoin node, then they're definitely able to run a Fedimint. So you download the software, you click run, we'll have a nice interface where you say, okay, how many guardians? 5. How many are the minimum you need to be able to run? And then you say 3, because it could be 10 and you want 7, for example.
Okay, so that's the multi-sig setup.
That's the multi-sig setup. You set up a Bitcoin node, and as part of the setup, you get your own private key and public key locally.
You get one private key.
And public. Well, that's set up by you on your Bitcoin nodes.
Yeah, okay. But each of the guardians have one private key.
Yes, each guardian sets up a Bitcoin node and sets up their own private key and public key, as if they were going to be their own normal Bitcoin, and they could use that private key and public key as well for their own Bitcoin as well, separately if they wish to. So a guardian can have a self-custodial wallet as well for their own custody with their own private key if they wish. And then they would run the Fedimint software, point it to their Bitcoin node, and so Fedimint will know what their public key is, and they'll say, okay, your public key is this, your IP address. Your IP address is this, and how many guardians are there? And you'll say there's 5. How many guardians need to be able to sign a transaction? 3. So it becomes 3 of 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So enter the other 4 guardians' public keys, and then to the other 4 guardians' IP addresses. Public key, IP address, public key, IP address 4 times, and then each one of the guardians do the same thing. So you could imagine that they could get together on a chat or a Zoom chat or Zoom
in
call,
person or however.
or in person or however, and they just need to share the public keys, which, by the way, no one else, it can't be useful anyways because it's a public key, and their IP addresses with each other. Maybe on one group chat, they just enter each other's details and everybody enters it in. That is a setup. Then you click go. There'll be some other little configuration details like the name of the federation and stuff like that.
Parameters to fill.
But there'll be very simple things, but maybe like a 1-line paragraph describing it so that anyone who joins sees these descriptions. But that's the key, the public key and the address. Once you've done that and click go, your federation will be waiting for everybody else to do the same thing. Once the last of the 5 people enters the details of everyone else, the federation will contact each other, and a federation will be formed. Now, what I mean by a federation is a group of computers are working together to perform one task in a manner which prevents any one actor who goes offline or behaving badly affecting the process. So what federations like to do is perform, normally in computing, you want to take a task that's performed by lots of machines and make it more efficient so it runs on less and less hardware. Yeah, so it can go faster, etc. Federations take the opposite approach. You take something that can run on one machine, but you make it run in a way, the same function runs in a way where it runs on multiple machines in parallel, and they're constantly checking with each other, and everybody has to move together. If one person, or if some of us, a minority of people stop performing or stopped moving forward or do things that are not expected, then the majority ignore them and carry on with the function.
Okay, so yeah, you're not optimizing for efficiency or speed.
We're optimizing for redundancy and protection from bad actors.
Exactly.
But it can run any program. So actually, Fedimint is almost like an operating system to run any application in a federated manner. But what we do is, the things that you want to run in that manner are very high importance tasks because there's more overhead. And so they're monetary tasks. So Fedimint comes with 3 applications as standard, effectively. One is multi-sig Bitcoin custody, where each of the guardians has a key and it forms a multi-sig wallet. And that is the wallet where you will be able to deposit money in or pay money out from. Any payments out have to be agreed by the majority of the guardians because it's run in a federated manner. If one person wants to send it in a direction that the others don't agree with, they will be ignored and be kicked off the system. If one person's machine is down, that won't matter, it'll continue to operate.
As long as you have 3 out of 5.
So it gives you more reliability and it gives you more protection from bad actors. And also, but any deposit coming in will be processed by all of them automatically as well. The second application that comes as standard with Fedimint is También eCash. And También, David Chaum is one of the fathers of cryptography. He was mentioned in Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper. And what También eCash is a privacy protocol. In fact, it was invented in 1983. So next year it'll be 40 years old. And this concept was for this digital form of cash which provides cryptographically near perfect privacy. If you look at all the other privacy approaches that we have put in place since then, Monero, etc., this level of privacy is considered the gold standard, the Bitcoin standard in terms of privacy. The challenge was that it was incredible privacy, but you had to rely on one bank and one money. Now, in 2009, with the invention of Bitcoin, for the first time, we were able to have a money that can be owned by multiple people. Because with multi-sig, multiple people can have joint ownership of a certain amount of money. Think about a $1 note. You can't have 10 people in 10 different countries, each having ownership of that $1 note. You can give them 10 cents each, but then they're each having individual ownership of 10 cents. Yes, but if you want them all to own the $1 note, they'll have to all hold on to the $1 note together,
at the same time.
which is not practical. With Bitcoin, we can now, at a distance, have multiple people have ownership of that note.
Okay, let me translate this to people, for people who are not that technical savvy. This could be the equivalent of an escrow. You go to a bank, you open an escrow account, and you say, okay, here are my family members, we are 5. You need at least 3 to sign in order to move these resources. So they all are the owners of this money, that it's on a centralized entity, that's the main issue, but they all collectively have the property or have the possession of this asset.
Yeah, that's very similar, I guess, but the very important difference is that escrow is not a real ownership. The bank owns the money. It's in the money. The money is in the bank's vault, and everybody is trusting the bank to obey those laws. If one of the members of the family has a very good relationship with the bank manager, in theory, they could work with the bank manager to take away the money.
Or if the bank goes bankrupt, or if the government intervenes,
or they get robbed, or so on. With multi-sig on Bitcoin, for the first time ever in the world, we were able to have this digital representation of money, or any money actually, because prior to that, money was physical. For the first time ever, we were able to have money which was truly owned by the family. There was no possibility of a third party going bankrupt or colluding with one of them. The money is owned truly by them, by the parties.
Okay, let's go back to Chamian mints. Let's go back to this mint.
So the Chamian mint, what it does is a privacy protocol, and it requires one bank and one money. Federations allow you to have multiple banks working together, effectively each guardian, multiple guardians, and Bitcoin as the money, which can be owned by multiple guardians, and that's allowed you to federate the Chamian mint. But how Chamian mints work? This is the second application. Bitcoin multisig is the first. The second is Chamian mints. It's very simple. You can think of an analogy of, well, first of all, the key innovation, which was made in 1983, was this idea of called blinded signatures. And it's similar to the idea where you imagine if you have a receipt or a check, and you can stamp the check, and there's this sort of ink paper, which when you stamp and you take off the ink paper, it leaves the mark of the stamp on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So you can take an envelope, a blinded signatures, you take an envelope, you put some paper inside the envelope, you put this ink paper on top of the paper, on top of the paper, inside the envelope, and you close the envelope. You then sign on the outside of the envelope. If you then open the envelope and take out the paper, your signature would be on the paper inside.
But you cannot see it on the envelope without opening it.
Yes. No, you can see it on the envelope. You throw away the envelope. It allows you to sign. But so what you can do is I can give you an envelope with, let's say it was a check for $1 million or $500 or $10, for example, or just a smiley face. I put it in the envelope and I give it to you, and then you sign the envelope, and then you give it back to me. I open the envelope and I've got the piece of paper with your signature on it. So in that way, I can get you to sign something without seeing what you're signing. Yes, because you're signing, but you don't know what you're signing.
Yeah, I'm signing on the envelope. Inside the envelope is the paper with the ink. So the ink goes to the other paper, but I don't know what I'm signing.
You can be signing a check
that is my signature.
But you separately, then I can take that check, which is the eCash, which says $1,000 on it, and I can go off and spend that, or give it to someone else, and then they can give it back to you, and you can say, well, I signed this because you can see this is your signature, therefore I'm going to accept it. Okay. Now the way it actually works is you would have different signatures, different stamps. You'd have a $10 stamp, a $100 stamp, and a $1,000 stamp.
So you need 3 private keys. Each guardian needs to have.
You'll have keys for each denomination of token. So you have a $1, a $10, $100, and a $1,000 token.
Okay. Let's simplify it and make it practical. Don't go into those technical details. So we already have the federation. We set up the multisig. Now someone says, okay, I trust you. I want to be part of this Fedimint. I'm gonna deposit, let's say, 1 Bitcoin into this multisig direction that we created with the guardians. And what happens to this person? Let's assume that there's only one type of note, the 100 Satoshis or something to make it easier. So what happens? What does this person
100
get?
100 Satoshis, well.
Or 1,000 or 100,000 to make it easier.
Yeah, let's say 100,000 Satoshis. I'm not sure how that's, because 100 million.
Let's do 1 million Satoshis, so it's easier.
So 1 million Satoshis is the only note. Yeah. So, and they deposit 1 Bitcoin.
I deposit 1 Bitcoin, the federation owns it.
So what would happen is, you would deposit 1 Bitcoin if you're depositing it on chain. Yeah. Once it has a number of confirmations, because we want to avoid double spends, we would store that. That will be immediately stored in our multi-sig wallet. We'll wait for some confirmations, and then we would want to issue a certain amount of eCash tokens. What would happen is you would separately send us. You want in that case 1 million Satoshis, so that's 100. So you would send us 100 pieces of random information, completely random information, but you provide it to us.
So I can send you 100 pictures, or what kind of?
Well, it'll be a random
string of
It'll be a
numbers.
random string. Yeah, random string. Each random string represents a
bill,
a note, a bill. But you will blind it first. You'll put it in this envelope, and then and you'll say, I want 1 Bitcoin's worth of notes, and I'm sending you. So I want 1 million Satoshi notes, and you would send that request, and then you would send in 100 of these blinded envelopes. You would provide information, a secret, so that I can link your request for these notes to the money coming in, that only you would know, but by virtue of where you sent the money to and how much you sent. So you will then be able to send us the information on the other side for us to know that you're the person who deposited the 1 Bitcoin. I don't know who you are, but I just know that only the person who deposited would know this secret, and therefore you provide a secret, so you have the right to get the notes related to that money in. Okay? So that's just like a passphrase to say, I'm the right person, whoever I am, to get these notes. So you send 100 envelopes with random information in that I don't know as the guardian. And I, with each one of those, having seen the monies come in, I stamp with the million Satoshi stamp. So then I end up, now I've stamped 100 envelopes with the million Satoshi stamp. I then send those back to you. You then unblind them, i.e. you take out the envelope. You can still see that your random information that you passed is the same random information, so that you know that no one's messed with it. And you can see that it now contains this stamp. You can also see that the stamp, you know the public keys, the combined mostly public keys of the guardians. So you know that the stamp, Matt, you can also verify that that's what you're expecting it to have been signed by. It's like a signature.
So it has been signed by at least 3 out of the 5
yes, and you
guarders
know,
in this.
and you'll be able to verify that it has been as well, because you're aware of what their
public keys.
Yeah. So they're public keys. So but only they can sign it, but you now know they've signed it. So you know personally that it's been signed by them, and you know that the random data for each one, only you know, they don't know.
Okay, so for people who are a little bit lost with these technical details, basically I send 1 Bitcoin and I get back.
There's no way to say it simpler though, I guess.
So I'm gonna try to do it. I get back 100 new notes or tokens, let's call them, that represent each 1 million Satoshi. So in the end, I have 1 Bitcoin, but in notes, right? In eCash.
In 100 notes, yes.
Yeah, in 100 notes. Okay, and now.
But the important step was that there was this blinding and unblinding. So the guardians don't know who they're giving the notes to.
Yeah, and they don't know. Okay, so they don't know who I am. It's like, let's say that in the past, I could send someone with my gold to a bank and they issue notes that represent that gold.
Yes, but they will know the person who went to the
but
bank.
that's why I sent someone or with a mask or whatever. There's some privacy there. This obviously has much more privacy. Okay, now I have these 100 million Satoshis. If I want to transact, how does it work?
So if I want to transact, these are now bearer instruments. They're cash. And that's what's really cool about them. Each one of those notes, you can now give to anyone else who is in the federation. Because if they're in the federation, they also trust the federation. Yeah. And so you can just give it to them directly. You can take, if they want to give them 1 million Satoshis, you take any one of those and you just give them that note. Yeah. That's really simple, because in the same way you have a banknote and each one has a unique reference on it and so on. But the unique reference, instead of it being made by the bank, is being made by you. So you've made the unique reference, but still, it's still a note. And anyone who receives it can check that the signature
belongs to the bank, to the guardians.
To the guardians, so they can know that they can accept it. Now, there is a risk you can double spend. You can send a note to multiple people. Yeah. And so to protect themselves against that risk, the person who receives it will normally, unless they trust you, they normally immediately take the note they've received from you and go back to the bank with an envelope to be signed, a new blinded note, and the note they've just received, and say, here, can you redeem this note and give me another note of the same value back?
Okay, because that person needs to make sure that he or she is the only one who knows that secret or
so that would happen the moment they receive the money. A fraction of a second later, they will basically exchange the old note, because it's old dirty note, with a brand new note. And again, the brand new note is blinded, but the old note is not blinded anymore. It's sent back. The guardians will then know from their signature that basically when they receive this one back, they will check the signature and they'll go, okay, that signature matches our signature, so this is a valid note. I don't know who it came from. Could have come from anybody. It could have been exchanged 50 times or once, but I do know we signed it, and I know we signed it with the million Satoshi stamp, so I accept that service, million Satoshis. So what I will do is I have a list of notes that have been spent, and I add it to the list of notes that are spent, so someone else can't spend it again. But it's just a tiny list. It takes only a few bytes to say the list, so you could handle hundreds of millions of transactions for many years before you'll use up a small hard drive, because they're tiny. In terms of the transaction size, it's like a few words of space per note being redeemed, so it's tiny. So I know that that's been spent, and then what do you want me to do? You either want me to give you the equivalent amount of Bitcoin on chain, or in this case, you want me to take another note, an envelope you sent me, so it means you must want me to swap your notes, so they stamp that with another million Satoshi sats and send that back. And that way, but for the user's point of view, they've just received the money, and then they've just gone back to the bank and say, can you swap this with new money? Thanks. And walked out. That all happened in a fraction of a second.
Okay, so going back to my example where you could send someone with your gold and get some notes, then you can pay someone with that certificate that says, okay, there's some gold stored in this vault. That person that receives it just goes to the bank and say, okay, I want my gold back, or I want another note. Replace this note because it's old. The other person already knows it. I don't know if the other person printed another version or whatever.
But they go to just to make the example correct, they go to the bank, but the bank machine, the teller behind the kiosk has no window on the kiosk. They have no window. They only have a place to put the money and take it out, and a command, and instructions. So it's like a blind bank where it's only run by blind people, or it has.
There's privacy.
There's privacy. Yeah. But yes, in that case, it's the same scenario. You go on with this note and you get gold, and notes and say, please give me some gold, and the person reads the instructions and gives you gold, or please give me another note, and then they give you another note to replace.
Okay. So far, this is working in the sense that first, there's no central entity that has my funds. It's a group of people that
Instead,
I trust.
it's being federated, yes.
And you can create that federation with as many guardians as you want.
Yes, it's multi-sig, so multi-sig takes up space on the blockchain. At some point, once later we'll add Taproot support, and you just saw, although it caused problems with LND, someone did a 998. So at that point, we could have very large federations, and Taproot is on the roadmap to support at some point. So, but right now, practically, you probably don't want to get above, 20 people, guardians. Also, though, more practically, trust doesn't scale, because remember, you want the most trustworthy, most high integrity technical people in your community, and your trust level for your federation is the average of the trust level of your people. So adding more people doesn't necessarily increase trust. Unless they're equally trustworthy, and technically, if they become less trustworthy, then you're actually reducing your average trustworthiness. So it'll be interesting to see different federations, the amounts they choose. But my gut is 5 on the lower end, so you have redundancy, and maybe 10 to 15 on the high end. If you take big exchanges, they all use multi-sig to store their customers' money. Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, they won't. And then even if they employ thousands of people, I can guarantee you that it's only probably 5 to 10 to 15 who are actually custodying And we're talking about billions of dollars worth of money, because you don't want every employer of Coinbase or of Kraken to be responsible, because if the poorest, least trustworthy 50% decide, we're going to quit, they could take all those customers' money.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I get it completely. So you're decentralizing custody, and you're also scaling Bitcoin, because all these once I have the 100 bills of a million satoshis, and I start moving them, I'm not consuming any space, I'm not writing anything on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yes, and it's even more than that, because I talked about the first app being Bitcoin Multisig. The second federated app that comes as standard is the También eCash, and it's this payment system as well. And the third is connection to the Lightning Network, so you can seamlessly make transactions with the Lightning Network, and that's a whole separate interesting conversation on how that works. But Bitcoin has its own scaling on-chain, its own scaling limitations. Lightning currently also has its own scaling limitations as well, but are much higher than Bitcoin's. But with Fedimint, imagine you can think of the Lightning Network as sort of highways between that go around a country. If you have your own node, it's like having your own private road. And if you have your own custody, it's having your own private mansion in the countryside with your own private road. But that doesn't scale. Everybody can't have their own private road. If in New York everybody had their own private road, then New York would be all road and very little people living, just thinking about all the connections you have to make. But what Fedimint allows you to do is effectively have the equivalent of a city, and with one or two major roads coming in and out of the city, which are the Lightning Network connections, like a highway network, a Lightning Network. But once you're in the city, all the transactions happening within the city, and the majority of people's transactions are local. If you think about it, your rent, your food, maybe your fuel, these are your three biggest costs in most parts of the world. They're all local expenditure compared to what you spend on rent and accommodation and transport to what you spend on Netflix. It's a tiny percentage of your overall spend. So your local payments for day-to-day hyper-Bitcoinized living will happen locally within your communities, and those ones will happen within eCash to eCash, involving directly the Guardian's servers to process them. Only when you need to make a payment to buy a Netflix subscription, or to someone who happens to be outside using their own Lightning Network connection or in another city, does a transaction go over the Lightning Network.
Yeah.
And only when someone who's processing the Lightning Network transactions, one of these nodes who has these outgoing connections, needs to balance their Lightning channels, which is something that people who run Lightning networks need to do now and again. Do you need to do an on-chain transaction? So you might say it could be for every 1,000 or 10,000 transactions within the federation, there might be 1 or 2 transactions happening on the Lightning Network. And for every 1 or 2 transactions happening, or every 1,000 to 10,000 transactions happening on the Lightning Network, there'll be 1 to 2 happening on the main chain, only to rebalance channels.
Yeah. So let me summarize what you just said. Let's say that in the future we're going to have a federation for each community. You could be part of multiple communities, multiple federations. Let's say that we have a school, and everyone in the school goes to the same store, they transact among themselves, and if they want to send money outside of the school, they could use Lightning or they could use on-chain. Lightning is a little bit more complicated. You have a third actor that we haven't mentioned, that is the one that receives the También cash and makes the payment with Lightning, right?
Correct.
Let's don't get into that detail.
No, we don't need to go into
the point is that we can use both on-chain, Lightning, or eCash once we are part of this federation. As soon as you want to go, you can get your money back or your Bitcoin on-chain or through Lightning, and you can make payments through Lightning or obviously through the eCash. What's the stage of this solution? Like, can I test it? Can I try it now? Are there Fedimints working already?
So about a week ago, Hackers Congress in Prague happened again, 1 year later after we'd met. And Fedi was a sponsor of this.
Okay, so let's talk about Fedi, because
Yes.
Fedimint is different from Fedi.
Yes. So Fedimint is the protocol which we've been talking about so far. This is the decentralized, censorship-resistant custody of Bitcoin.
And it's open source and everyone
And it's open source. And that's been worked on for a number of years. I got involved about a year ago at Hackers Congress in Prague. And we were back there sponsoring with this organization we set up. But it was focused on Fedimint,
The protocol.
the protocol. Now, 5 months ago, I went to Oslo for the Oslo Freedom Forum. And there I met some of the bravest men and women, human rights defenders, activists, NGOs, and their stories of challenges all across, generally speaking, the global south. So Africa, many places in Latin America, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and also post-Soviet regions of the world. These are places where, in general, people are living under authoritarian regimes or dictatorships. Not all of the places, not all of these countries are like that, but there are quite a lot of countries like that in these regions. And so these men and women are fighting to change that or support people living in those parts of the world. And it was there I realized that they all are coming to the realization that control of money and the banking system in these countries by these regimes is used as a weapon to control people. Inflation is used as a weapon there, and controlling banking is used as a weapon. And it's sometimes a dangerous weapon. If you send money, if you're an organization trying to support people in a certain country and you send them money using the normal banking system, because of the way the banking system works, these regimes can see the money coming in, who it's coming from, realize it's someone that they don't want it to come from, and then the person you're trying to help gets arrested or even killed. So the banking system fails them. So they've struggled and they figured out that the only way in these scenarios they can actually have banking, which is almost at the level of a human right, the ability to hold and own and transfer money nowadays, is to use Bitcoin. And in fact, I was at Bitcoin Amsterdam and we were talking about it just there, how this has become the bank of last resort. It's not, in theory, wouldn't it be nice? It's the only way they can support their friends and family without those people being arrested or killed, maintaining safety, but still being able to survive. So, and we see the story again and again and again. So after Oslo Freedom Forum, when I started to hear the story, I realized that although I was supporting Fedimint and it was an incredible project, more was needed to be done. So I talked to my co-founders at this stage, Justin Moon, Eric Syrian, and myself, explained what happened and the story, and we all agreed that we need to make a commercial entity to accelerate the adoption of Fedimint. It was naturally growing, but we want it to happen faster because these people around the world, and by the way, it's important to remember that more than half the world lives under authoritarian regimes or dictatorships. It's the majority of the world. So these billions of people around the world and the people who are supporting them need Fedimint because we realize that there's no other solution. You cannot use regulated banks because they'll be regulated by your government. So half the world, it doesn't
Or
help.
exchanges. Exchanges don't solve that.
They're regulated financial institutions. So you have to be regulated in the country, you won't be able to solve it there. So that's problem number one. And self-custody, after 8 years of running an exchange, I realized that although that's the best, it's gonna be very difficult to see majority of people being comfortable with dealing with all the complexity of self-custody. So Fedimint was the solution where we get communities to have each other's backs, to work together to provide a solution which is as reliable, if not more reliable than an exchange, but it's easy to use, but providing incredible privacy, because again, especially in these scenarios, privacy is paramount. You want to be able to maintain financial privacy no matter what. And also it has redundancy and so on. And community sovereignty. It's not self-sovereignty, but which is the gold standard or the Bitcoin standard, but it's community sovereignty. So Fedimint was set up. We started fundraising in June. Within a week, we raised the money because we focus on Bitcoin-focused investors who understood the importance of hyper-Bitcoinizing the world, starting with the people who needed it most. So there was massive broad support. We then had incredible support from the Bitcoin community. And also we've continued to work with and talk to and support these activist groups and NGOs and human rights defender groups that we first met in June of this year. So that's how Fedi came about. So Fedi's objective is to roll this out. It's a global product. Fedimint can be used by anybody, anywhere. But we realize that the global south is the biggest opportunity because they have the least financial systems that they can rely upon and support. They have the highest prevalence of organization or of dictatorships and authoritarian regimes where they don't necessarily are able to trust them. And therefore they immediately understand why something like Bitcoin is necessary. And they're already adopting it like crazy, but they just need a better tool to allow them to accelerate that adoption. And Fedi is going to make sure that happens. We do that by three things. Just one is code. And we say code, collaboration, and coaching. Code is an app. We call it the Fedi app, and it's designed to be the world's simplest Lightning app. We've talked about lots of complexity in the back end for Fedimint. Fedimint's incredible technology. It's really easy to set up and run, but behind the scenes it's doing a number of very clever things. Multi-sig custody, Xiaomi, eCash, and Lightning. But Fedi, all of that clever code enables Fedi, the Fedi app, to be really, really simple. It will look like, to most people, a very simple app that they're used to, but the difference is you're not relying on exchange, you're relying on your community.
So is it like a wallet? Is the Fedimint wallet?
It's like a wallet, but it's more than that. It's a wallet, but it also brings in and this is where the next part, collaboration, comes in. It brings in the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem. So within the wallet, we surface all of there's a number of really incredible companies in the Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem that provide really powerful services and features, but people just don't know about them because they have to they're generally asked to read the Bitcoin Standard or read some book and Bitcoin for Dummies and then just go and browse the web and figure it out themselves. What we do is we bring that all together. So the code, simple to use wallet. Also a mechanism to be aware of all the things in the Bitcoin ecosystem, websites, apps, and so on, and services that they can immediately use to improve their life, to improve their remittance, potentially earn money, so on and so forth.
So resources?
So there's resources, yes. And then finally is coaching. So code, collaboration, coaching. And coaching is, with Fedi, as part of Fedi, we are looking to roll out over the coming years as a network of educators and ambassadors who will be focused on Latin America and Africa, all across those regions, who will be local representatives of Fedi, who will be able to educate people on how to use Fedi, but also how to use all these other apps which are integrated with Fedi. So if you use the apps and you earn money, for example, it'll immediately appear in your wallet balance because we'll use a Lightning payment. Or if you want to do remittance with an app, we'll integrate so you don't have to switch between multiple apps. You can do it all from one place. You can, whatever feature or service that's provided, over time, we will integrate the best of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And then we have people on the ground who understand the local culture and understand and speak the local language and are part of the communities that they're trying to service, whose job it is to just be there, be on the ground support for helping people set up federations, helping people deal with customer service support queries they have about federations, and also educating people on how to use these federations and how to use these other Lightning and Bitcoin related company services to improve their lives in a way that makes sense for the local jurisdiction and the local needs.
Okay, so
that's Fedi.
Yeah, so the protocol, Fedimint, is it ready? Is it work?
So Fedimint, the protocol, you asked the question. So Hackers Congress last week, the week before last, we did our first, and you can see it on our Twitter, our first Lightning transactions where we bought cups of coffee and so on. Anybody who came to that event, we gave them a little bit of Bitcoin on the main chain, i.e. Bitcoin, not testnet Bitcoin, and people were able to use it. Even and we set up a small temporary federation. So we are at the stage where people can. It's working. Fedimint's working.
So people got Bitcoin on chain, or they got Lightning Bitcoin.
They received Bitcoin into the federation.
Okay, so they got eCash, Xiaomian.
Yes,
eCash.
but they were able to use it to buy. They were able to receive money from on chain or over Lightning. Able to pay for things over Lightning. They were able to do all of this. So that's working now.
Through what interface? Fedi?
Not through Fedi. So that was through, because it's an open standard. Anyone can build an app for it. There's another implementation called Fedimint,
which
is much more basic. It doesn't have all the features that Fedi is.
That's more like a wallet, like a basic wallet.
It's not even that, because it doesn't have the ability to back up, for example. It's very much, it's
to use for tests.
But it still works, and you can use it for tests. But still, it exists. And Fedi is looking to launch in Q1. So it's coming soon. And the reason I have a little bit of a stubble is because we're working around the clock, because we know people need it. But we also want to make sure it's tested and reliable.
You need to,
because it's holding money. But so far, even with Fedimint, and because most of the hard work is handled by Fedimint, the protocol, the wallet is just, because of the model, the wallet is just a user interface on all the hard work, which has been happening for multiple years on Fedimint. So much of the last period is very little on adding functionality, more on just testing on the core protocol. So Fedimint is, I think right now we feel that we can start using it and people are giving feedback. The reason why we launched it at the Hackers Congress is because we want to get the world's best hackers to constantly hit it before we give it to people in the global south or in post-Soviet regions who are trying to use it to save their lives. We want to make sure it works. But it was incredibly reliable, but it's been reliable for a long time already because we've been working on it for a while. But what we plan to do is start trialing it within the global south, most likely Latin America, Africa, so focus a few key points in Q1 of next year. At that point, once it's out, other people might figure out how to download it and so on. It's an open system, we won't be able to control that. But what we're wanting to do is have really intense oversight and work with half a dozen communities from Latin America and Africa. We on our website right now, we have a section where people can apply to see if they want to be one of those. And we had it open for 2 months, and we've got several dozen communities who, the exact numbers are hard to say, but conservatively, they look like around already over 800,000 people these communities represent. And we haven't even tried. And these are people who are willing to work with us and trial it and so on. And so we're going to take some of the best of those communities, plus there's all these human rights defenders who represent communities of tens, hundreds, in some cases millions of people who also want to roll this out aggressively next year. So our ability to roll it out at scale is not the problem. It's just to make sure that
everything
we do.
works.
So we'll probably choose the best 6 to 10, and then we will work with them on the ground, help them set up the machines, maybe take a subset of the community to begin with, 20, 30 people who are most able to give it a real go, and then we expand as we are comfortable over 3 months, learn, adjust, tweak the interface. Also, we'll be starting to roll out our network of ambassadors and educators starting in these areas and educate the first initial ambassadors so that then we take a step back to see how it's working. And so we adjust that, because that network of ambassadors is just as important to Fedi. Hundreds of ambassadors across Latin America and Africa who are employees of Fedi working on this to make sure that they're available, which again differentiates us from other organizations which tend to be very, in the space, tend to be very tech heavy, but light on the ground, but not remote, on the ground resources. So we want to be very, very heavy on the ground resources, and because we think that's a key thing that's missing. People on the ground who know the local people who represent us, so that we can always have someone that you can talk to in your own language who's incentivized and directed towards supporting those communities, come what may. And so we'll be rolling that. Well, we're rolling that out over the coming years, but the initial rollout of that will be Q1
next year.
Yeah, the hiring, obviously finding the right people we have 3 things we're looking for. So if there's anybody from your region who wants to come,
everyone.
it's on the. So we're gonna right now. We did an initial call for community leaders who want to help to trial.
Who wants to be guardians, or who
want to be guardians and roll it out in their communities, and they've already been building up. So a lot of these people have already been trying to do it with existing systems, but they found that it's too complex or too difficult or so on. And when they hear about Fedimint, it's like that's the ideal solution for us. So we've got already that, and we're over, and that's conservatively because communities are growing. We're taking the most conservative estimates of numbers, and it's over 800,000 already, 880,000 or something like that, conservatively. So that call is going to stop because it's more than enough. We needed 6 groups of 20, 30, and we've got like dozens and dozens of groups of sometimes 100,000 people.
Which is a good problem.
So it's a good problem to have. So we've got that. The next is coming out will be, and it's the first time anybody hears about it, will be a call for nights, a call for people to be these ambassadors, And these ambassadors are, we like to call them knights, like Fedi knights, and caballeros de Fedi.
The knights with armor and...
Yeah. And we'll be looking for a call for these, and we'll be looking to hire them aggressively in next year, over the coming years. But they will need 3 things, just like proof of work. We need 3 proofs from them in our decision criteria. Proof of integrity. So we'll need to get a feeling or proof that they've acted with integrity consistently. That's a high integrity people. Proof of community service, because they're there to serve these communities, and they're paramount. They should love and care about seeing their local communities and regions that they're responsible for grow and develop and be hyper-recognized. And proof of passion, because they need to be working, really, really passionate about rolling this out, and because the passion is infectious, and we need to share that passion. So that's what I'm giving you a pre-see of what we're looking for. We'll have a special page on our site, and that will be an ongoing. We'll be hiring those people for the many years to come.
Yeah, I'll add a link to your website on the bottom, on the description of the video.
Keep an eye out for that, yeah.
And you need to keep up.
And if you're a community as well who's looking to want to be a trial, the pages are still open. We've already got more than enough, but if you really feel that you're someone within your community has the respect of your community, cares about your community as well, the same 3 things: integrity, community service, and passion, but also who has the respect of their community, who can get their community to give this a try, give this system a try, then it's still open for a period of time before we switch to hiring the ambassadors, the knights.
Yeah, you got it. I'm gonna talk to some fellow Bitcoiners back in Colombia and see if we can arrange a federation and start trying it out, like testing it, and obviously teaching people about this. I have 2 quick questions.
Yes.
Completely, not unrelated, but changing a little bit of the subject. If I have some eCash in one federation, can I move to another one?
Absolutely.
How does it work? Like I withdraw via Lightning and then I
100%.
That's how it works. Okay.
So if you have eCash, we say eCash, but then Lightning also is Lightning Bitcoin on the Lightning network. eCash is Bitcoin within a federation, and then Bitcoin is Bitcoin on main chain, but it's all Bitcoin. When you use your wallet and you want to send a payment, it looks like a Lightning transaction. You don't need to, as a user, not the guardians the guardians are running the federation, but they are also users. They have the app as well. And other than they're an app, they also have the guardian machine. But once they've done that, they don't need to touch it on an ongoing basis. But with the app, it looks like you're making a Lightning payment. So someone wants to pay for something in a shop and they show you a QR code to scan, you scan the QR code. If they're in your federation, what happens is it goes to the this Lightning service provider who provides access to the Lightning network. But the clever part of the code for this third app is it will make the Lightning service provider aware that both people are in the same federation, and it would just move eCash instead.
Okay.
But if the person that you're paying to has their own Lightning node and they have their own Lightning wallet, then it would send the payment over the Lightning network to them. Okay. If the other person's in a federation, it sends it over the Lightning network to another Lightning service provider of the other federation who converts it back into eCash, and the other person receives it. But from both of your points of view, don't have to worry about any of that.
Oh, great.
All of that's handled by Fedimint. That was the first part of the conversation. But all that's handled automatically. But from your point of view, wherever you're paying, it's a Lightning invoice.
That's amazing.
One might be slightly lower cost because the Lightning's already inexpensive, but within a federation, it will maybe even cheaper.
And eventually you could potentially think of doing some kind of atomic swap between federations, so you don't even have to use Lightning. Like you can give this node to someone and then receive some node on the other federation. Maybe not.
That's really interesting. I believe it might have been Eric Yakes, who's recently on what Bitcoin did. He does lots of analysis on banking and free banking as this model and how it came about and why it was a very productive model. And I was talking to him. I was last month in El Salvador for Mi Primer Bitcoin, the Bitcoin diploma. Yeah. And I was with Eric Yakes there, and we were talking about this, and he wants to look at it more. But I think it was him, might have been someone else. But we were having a discussion that eventually some federations may decide to set up direct, if there's a lot of traffic between them, it may be preferential to just effectively accept each other's notes. Yeah. So they could be effectively, the easy way to do that would be to be, each federation would be users of the other federation. So they're able, and so then it would, if you sign up to the other federation, then any payments to a user of one federation will just effectively be a balance of eCash. But that starts getting into holding balances of users on other federations and intermingling of federation funds if you do that.
Yeah, you could eventually have like liquidity providers, people who are willing to deposit Bitcoin on multiple federations.
And that I would prefer that approach, because in that way the liquidity provider is taking the risk of doing that. But that effectively happens automatically if you have a Lightning network, because if you say are a Lightning service provider connected to one federation, but you also are connected to another federation, you've effectively just short-circuited, because what would happen is
you don't have to make the payments.
So a liquidity provider is a Lightning service provider who's connected to two federations.
That's true.
So it would just naturally happen, because then you'll say, well, if all the ones are going to these set of addresses, why don't I just find out who the other federation is? If I trust them, I just sign up to that federation as well, and then all these transactions will happen instantly and between me. But if I become untrusted or I turn off, it doesn't matter, because federations can connect to multiple Lightning service providers. So they will go through me most of the time because I'm connected to both. But if I'm down or offline, or I start increasing my costs,
they can take a longer route.
They'll take a longer, cheaper route, because a longer route will be 1 second instead of half a second. Yeah. You know, so even if I'm this connection, the beauty of the Lightning network and this approach, you'll naturally start seeing that occurring. People who have a higher bandwidth connections, you might start seeing that Lightning service providers will then be incentivized to connect to both, and that saves money for them, saving money for the users, because that will bring down prices, but not to the point of those Lightning nodes having the ability to control the flow. If their prices ever get too high, then automatically, as part of the protocol of Lightning, you'd route to a better path.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, the next question, and probably the last one, is: can you potentially have other type of assets, not Bitcoin, like with Taro now? You can create assets on Bitcoin and then move them through Lightning. could you potentially have not only cash or like e-cash notes that represent Bitcoin, but that represent other assets?
Yes,
You could.
absolutely. And I won't go into too much detail now, but the base protocol of Fedimint does support the idea of different denominations of assets that it supports. So you'll have a different set of keys for all your denominations of Bitcoin, but you'll also have a different set of keys for denominations of any other assets that you can support. So there, especially with the focus on the global south, traveling, I was in Kenya last week, El Salvador the last month. I'll be in Argentina and El Salvador again. I was going to go to Brazil, but now it's Lithuania in a month's time again, and then Ghana in another a month and a half. And once we roll out next year, I'll be spending pretty much most of my time between Africa and Latin America then, because I want to be on the ground. We want to be on the ground when we roll out, not here in Europe while we're rolling out in Africa and Latin America. We will be on the ground because that's the way you really learn. But even from the early research we did, we worked with Voluntad Popular, who was the opposition movement in Venezuela, to put together a research paper on usage in Venezuela of mobile money payments and so on. We're working with people in Africa to do similar studies and so on. And it all comes back again and again and again. There's certain consistencies. And one is, at this point in time, many people would want some sort of stable coins denominated system. And now, being Bitcoiners, we know the technical challenges with stablecoins on other blockchains. But what's exciting about solutions like Taro, and there are some others that are coming out that we also have the potential to be very, very exciting as well. And is that they provide a way which is actually beneficial to the Bitcoin network, works on top of the Bitcoin network, secured by the Bitcoin network, but still allows the transfer of stablecoins. Mm-hmm. And we think that can be, although that's not the end destination, we think the end destination is 100% will be Bitcoin. It's a good gateway and transition, getting people to have something that they understand and they value, and then slowly transition them across. Again, partly within the app, through education with the app, but also with the coaches, ongoing coaching over time. So we deliver value in the way that they want today, and then educate them over the coming years to understand
transition,
as opposed to
end, yeah.
Insist that they must understand it first before they transition. I can imagine when we train, we may not even mention Bitcoin, we just show them how to earn money or how to do remittance at a lower cost. Because these are things that they want to get solved, and we solve those, and then slowly educate them. By the way, the way you're doing it is using Bitcoin, Yeah,
similar to the exchange. It's an intermediary step to achieve Bitcoin full sovereignty.
Similar but different, because my worry of having run an exchange is that people get stuck at the exchange level, and the ongoing regulations prevent them going over from exchange to self-custody. Increasingly, like the Financial Action Task Force travel rule regulation makes it harder, the barriers, especially for the poorest, to withdraw higher and higher, because it adds a compliance overhead every time someone wants to withdraw. Well, that means exchanges then have to increase the cost for withdrawal. And if it costs you $10, $20, $30, $40 to withdraw, if you're wealthy, that doesn't penalize you. But if you're not wealthy, effectively acts like a barrier to you withdrawing, because you can't dollar cost average £10 a month if you're paying £10 a month if you're paying £50 to withdraw, because of the increased compliance overhead. So that's the concern with regulation, that if we eventually, although it's good in one sense because it makes it more mainstream, the nature of the regulation that's coming out also means that if you're below a certain wealth level, it becomes harder and harder to withdraw out to your own exchange. And also with these rules as well, exchanges are will be more and more inclined not to allow you to deposit money that was outside the system back in. So it gets harder and harder to convert into fiat or go from fiat to Bitcoin truly Bitcoin outside of a regulated exchange.
Okay, but have you talked to exchanges, or do you envision maybe in the future exchanges connecting directly to Fedimint? Like I deposit some cash and they give me e-cash notes, or like Bitcoin on a federation?
Yeah, so again, this is what I said earlier is a process that I think is going to happen over time.
Okay.
But and certain exchanges are very happy with that. They want to keep everybody in exchange and to never leave. But other exchanges are philosophically aligned with the values of Bitcoin, and they want to provide easier ways for people to custody. And yes, we are definitely talking to various exchanges, and there are a number who have expressed interest in being able to self-custody or provide people options to easily offboard.
Perfect. So I think that's it. I think I took a little bit longer than what I told you. So if people want to know more, or what other links should I include in the description besides the website?
So if you want to know more about Fedimint, which was the first part of the conversation, you should go to fedimint.org, which is the open source protocol. If you want to know more about Fedi and our plans around code, be it the wallet, collaborations, and the coaching, the nights, you should go to our site, which is Fedi, Fedi.xyz.
Okay.
And then if you want to see us more on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, Obi, just my name, @OBI.
Perfect.
I've been in Twitter for a long time. Or you can go to Fedi as well, which is @FediBTC.
Okay.
FEDIBTC.
I'll include all these links in the description. Well, and that's it. Well, now you can go to the description, click on those links to know more. Remember to like the video, subscribe, click on the bell button so that YouTube tells you more. Obi,
Perfect.
it was great.
Thank
you very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See you.